I have schizophrenia, and in 1989, I was 23 years old. I reached my bottom. I was diagnosed at 18, but I went in and out of Canadian Mental Health Association, and then I began to work. But that didn't work for me. I was burning myself out on both ends because I was really not helping myself. I was somewhat in denial, but in 1889 I had really reached my bottom. I went back into CMHA, and that's when things began to gel for me. That's when things began to work for me. And I began to see my doctor. I went into housing through CMHA. The house was called Kirkland. It was a great house. I began to learn how to cook. I began to socialize with other people who had similar lifestyles like mine, and then I began to really work on myself. The doctor advised me to go on medication, and I listened for the first time. I began to use my listening skills for the first time at that time. So by the time I got into TAMI, I had worked on myself for about 3 years. I was married finally, and I was instead of working at Clubhouse New Horizons, which I loved working at, I was now working at my co-op, which I was living at with my wife, and we were doing very well. And then I was on a bus with a friend of mine who said he had been at a meeting of people who were discussing forming a committee and going to schools, talk about mental illness. I thought this was fascinating, so I went. And they were quite surprised when he said, "This is Ivor." And then a few were quite surprised afterwards when I said, "I have my speech." So they just pretty well, I had written my speech several times, spoke in front of them, and I think that's where it all started. I think that's, and I was at my first school I was at was very nervous for me. I was very nervous, but I went through it, and the best way I could. There's a certain memory that stands out for me. I was at a school I think about 3 years ago or a couple of years ago, and we were at a school. I don't know the school, but I remember the school. But there was this girl. She looked about 17 or 18. She was in tears. She came up to me, and it was while we were preparing to leave, and she said she was so touched by my speech. And I was just awestruck by that. And she said that she was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 14. And she was just working on herself to tell her speech, or not, to get herself going, not to tell her, I'm sorry, but to get herself going and to, get her lifestyle better. And she was in tears, and she said she'd never seen anybody tell his speech like the way I told my speech, and to really get my life turned around the way I had, and that was so touching. It was, and there was another time where we were in elementary school. One of the first schools we were at in the elementary schools, and we were telling our stories. And a friend of mine who's also a speaker, we were going out to our car, and the students were following us, still answering questions. And I thought that was astonishing, that they were so gripped, or so spellbounded by that class and listening to our speech the way they had been listening, that they would still be so interested even after to go out to the parking lot with us and still try to get answers that they wanted. I think we need to reach out to the community and tell them that mental illness is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to hide. It's not something to shun. It's an illness like other illnesses. You know, it's something that we live with. It's something that we work with. And that we can do anything that we can set our mind to if we work at it. You know, to get the lifestyle we want, and I think it's perfectly workable to do that. But there's so many misgivings and stories, and the stigma is still big. We've come a long way since I was a teenager, but it's still out there, and we need to get the word out about it. And I think that's why I do it, because I think it's important. I'd like to see the stigma of mental illness gone for good. I love that. I love people just to treat mental illness like they treat other illnesses, like walkathons or telethons, or maybe go out and celebrity research like some of the celebrities do for other illnesses. I like them to treat mental illness like that, because I think it's time we treat mental health the way it should be treated, because there's a lot of people out there living important, successful lives that have mental illnesses, and we need to look at them and try to say, hey, I can do that too, because I have an illness.